Hello. The Dispensary Gallery have invited me to talk about my work and how it's changed and adapted during lockdown. So, who am I? My name is Nerissa Cargill Thompson. I'm a designer and maker with over 20 years experience of professional and community practice. I originally trained in theatre design, but it was through my community arts practice that my interest in textiles grew, and a desire to develop personal artwork rather than just designing for others. I decided to go back to uni, and I enrolled in the MA Textile Practice course at Manchester School of Art, graduating in 2018, so I consider myself an emerging artist, even though I'm pushing 50. It is my artistic practice. So, with a background in prop making, particularly masks and sculptural costumes, I knew I wanted to use these skills to manipulate textiles through stitch, molding and casting them to create three-dimensional work. I'm fascinated by how things change appearance and shape over time, not just eroding or decaying, but also new layers of growth, giving interesting juxtapositions of structure and colour. I use photography, just on my phone, to capture both natural and urban textures that inspire my textiles, and moments that suggest a story to me. I document and respond to the changes I see in the world around me, and I make work using clothes and scrap materials for economic and ecological sustainability. Most of my sculptural work highlights the issue of plastic pollution and climate change, influenced by the litter I encountered on the school run each day. Knowing that this litter was entering our waterways and ending up in our seas and on our beaches, found washed up on my trips back to my mum's on the coast of Fife. I want people to consider the packaging that we use and discard on a daily basis. Objects such as drinks bottles that are so lightweight and seem so insignificant that we barely notice them, but will take centuries to decompose. I cast them in cement to make them heavy and solid. The incorporation of detailed embroidery, inspired by nature, touches upon the way our waste becomes subsumed into the natural world around us. I have always been drawn to man-made objects on the beach, covered in seaweed and barnacles, or derelict properties overgrown with moss and ivy. My sculptures are formed using a combination of embellishing and embroidery to create coastal-inspired textures, blending a variety of recycled fabrics to create subtle variations in tone. I stitch the resulting textiles inside waste plastic that I use to cast true-to-life pieces with cement, giving a distinct contrast between the man-made structure of the packaging and the soft, natural textures. This year I've started a new series of work called No Man is an Island, combining textile maps and landscapes in domestic plastic packaging, as the embossed lines and grids remind me of those on maps. The title and work are about responsibility, as even uninhabited islands are polluted by plastic and some islands are disappearing, suffering from the knock-on effect of climate change and rising sea levels. How has this been impacted by lockdown restrictions and the pandemic? Well, when lockdown hit, I was in the middle of my largest piece to date, a full world map of over 22 panels for this year's Prism Contemporary Textiles exhibition at the Art Pavilion at Mile End. Unable to go to the sculpture studio, I ended up having to cast it in my back garden, nearly losing Alaska over the fence to a gust of wind, and much complaining from my back. Unsurprisingly, the exhibition was cancelled, but went fine, so I was glad that I'd persevered and finished making it, and was still able to share my work. The piece went on to be shortlisted for the Vliza Fine Art Textile Award, another exhibition forced online, but I still hope to exhibit it in real life, as both these exhibitions are hoping to go ahead in 2021. My first piece responding to the pandemic followed this series. It showed a world map with hints of red, showing the spread of the disease. I felt it fitted the No Man is an Island theme, as it was becoming increasingly important that we all had a responsibility of behaviour to help stop infection spreading, and that nobody could escape the impact of this pandemic on our lives. As my work often responds to the litter found in my community, I observed a change in this on my government-mandated lockdown health walks. I noticed fewer plastic bottles and takeaway cartons and started to find disposable gloves. This connected with my worry over plastic pollution, but also, like I mentioned before, the notion of story. Being gloves, they are hand shapes, so they suggest a human presence no longer there. Some looked as though they were still inhabited by a hand. Others had fallen to form gestures, not always polite ones, maybe suggesting a feeling or reaction to the pandemic. Some had formed shapes like somebody was practicing shadow puppets, and then there were those that were combinations as though they were communicating at a time when touch and communication was so restricted. Some combined with other litter to suggest a situation. So I started this collection of photographs as a way of documenting the pandemic. Initially, I was keen to make three-dimensional hands cast in gloves with textiles using my usual techniques, inspired by macro photographs of the coronavirus. Luckily, I have this small studio in my back garden, so the textiles weren't an issue in between the new task of homeschooling. But I usually do my casting in the sculpture room over at Neo Studios in Bolton, so that was an issue because these would be too intricate for garden casting. So I put them to one side and I started to make some gloves out of leftover ripstop fabric, manipulating them using stitch and heat. After the initial heat wave of lockdown, the rains came, and I was seeing gloves washed along the gutters and caught in the drains, reinforcing for me that notion of waste and loss of lives, particularly because of it being PPE of key workers. I thought back to the embossed patterns of the food trays that I used for No Man is an Island, and they reminded me of the drains and the grids, and so I started to cast my manipulated fabric gloves in these. So entombed in cement, it reinforced the permanence of loss and the long-lasting effect of this pandemic. As time went on, my collection of photos increased, death tolls rose, and my series of panels grew, forming a memorial. It also felt right to respond to the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests as part of this series. For only a short time in Greater Manchester, lockdown lifted and I was able to spend some time over in the reopened studios in Bolton, casting my three-dimensional gloves. Once done, I played with placing them on their own and in combinations, both on plain backgrounds and outside, like the gloves I'd made. I named them the Three Stooges after the way key workers have been treated. What am I currently working on? Well, unfortunately, on holiday, I broke my ankle getting out of a basket swing. So just as I got rid of my kids back to school and would have more time to make art, I was sofa bound. I use an embellishing machine for my textiles and I cast in Bolton, so that's all been on hold. So I've been catching up with things like this, updating my website, applying for future projects and exhibitions and recording video workshops. A couple of new pieces from the ongoing Beached collection were selected for the Warrington Open, and so they're currently on display in real life in a virtual exhibition until the end of December 2020. As I mentioned before, the Textile Award shortlist exhibition is online, so you can still view that. I also have been part of a local arts festival which went virtual this year using Mozilla Hubs and ArtSteps software. I presented an exhibition with help from the wonderful tech team at Chorlton Arts Festival. It was a collection of my pieces cast in local litter entitled The Litter You Leave, Future Fossils, and it can still be found online. I started back running some on-site art sessions with the disability group that I'm associate artist with. I did some video workshops over lockdown with them, and unfortunately, due to new restrictions, we've had to head back online, but this time keeping them live rather than recording videos. So what is next? Being a textile artist, I could have stopped and churned out masks through this. I did make some for friends and family from recycled fabrics, of course, but I think I confirmed my resolve as an artist rather than a crafter, which is a wobbly fence in the world of textiles. It was important to me to both respond to the crisis through my art, but to continue with both the Beached and No Man is an Island series, as it felt that just as people and governments were starting to take steps for change to help the climate crisis, the pandemic has caused a massive leap backwards towards single-use plastics. Headlines like "More masks in the sea than jellyfish" reiterate this. I have a couple of pieces combining the textures from Beached with mask-related sculptures that are ready to cast when my foot is better. As I cast in actual litter, the size of my work is determined by this. So to create larger pieces, I then have to start working in multiples. And this kind of reinforces the notion of the build-up of plastic waste. I've been working on the textiles for a piece called 10 Green Bottles that I'm eager to cast. I'm also looking forward to working as lead artist on the Green Loop project, exploring beach waste on the Fylde coast. This was due to be next year, but unfortunately it's been postponed to 2022. But basically, I intend to continue to make work that makes people consider their responsibility for our environment. At an exhibition last year, somebody compared my bottles that were on show to biblical samplers. Beautiful to have around, but a moral reminder of our sins. And I'm happy with that. So, where can you find me? I'm at Nerissa CT on most platforms, but I mainly use Instagram as it's brief and visual. It gives an insight into what I'm working on, exhibitions and key photos I'm using for inspiration, as it saves me trawling from my own photos. I also find it the best place to discover and interact with other artists, so please join me there. If you'd like to see more of my work, I have a portfolio website, www.nerissact.co.uk, where you can find the full range of my work and information on the workshops and community projects that I run. If you're still here, thanks for watching, and there should be some links to where you can see my work, both online and in real life, on the Dispensary Gallery website. Thanks to them for the opportunity to share my work and process with you, and goodbye.